couple days ago, I asked myself, why do people tell stories? And I thought about it a while. I didn't come up with much. The best I could do was, well, people tell stories because other people remember stories. So, you tell a couple of stories and people will remember that a lot better than if you just show some charts, some data. Then I realized it doesn't answer the question. The question is, why do people tell stories? That stuff just answers the question, why do people remember stories? And in fact, it doesn't even answer that question. It just tells us that people remember stories. So I didn't answer my question, why do people tell stories? Years ago, when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, my brother and I, we would go to our grandparents' house on the weekends, my mom's parents. And we would be joined by our cousins, Heather and James. And the four of us kids, we were all about the same age. We were 7, 8, 9 years old. And for the first couple minutes, when we would get to the house, we'd be in our best behavior. We'd be good kids. But then after a couple of minutes, and it only took about 2 minutes, just the kid energy, would start pumping up, and then pretty soon, we were being loud, and we were running around the house, and we were threatening to break things, and my mom would just say, just get out of the house. Just go into the backyard or something. So we would run out the door, and we would go to the backyard, and we would run around in the backyard, and we would run around on the green grass, and then we would go over here to the garden, and we would run around in the garden, and we would practically destroy the garden that my grandpa had worked so hard all week just to put back together after the last weekend that we toured. And then when we were done tearing up the garden, we would go over and we would harass the neighbor's dog. And the neighbor's dog, he was behind a big fence, and he was a big dog and he was a mean dog, but he was behind a fence. And so even though he would run at us and he would lunge at the fence and he would, bam, he would hit the fence. Yes, poor dog. His name was Toby, by the way. And he was barking and growling, and he had big teeth, and he was slobbering all over everywhere. But we were just so happy because we were, getting this dog all riled up, and he was banging against the fence, and we were perfectly safe. But we were little kids, and so we would just get so much energy, and we would get so energized, and pretty soon we would lose our cool. There was just so much energy there, and we just had to redirect the energy on something. And so, of course, instead of harassing the dog, we would harass my cousin Heather, because there were 3 of us boys, and there was 1 girl. And we would just harass her relentlessly. And eventually she would get so frustrated, so angry at us, and she would just start screeching, just yelling, ah, like that. And she had this loud, piercing scream, and I swear to God, the entire city could hear her scream. And then, about that time, my mom would come out. She would come out the back door, and she would open the door, and she'd come out on the porch and say, okay, kids, that's enough. And my God, we were outside, and it was enough. And she would say, come back in the house, come back in the house. Calm down. Put your inside voices on. Put your inside voices on and be in your best behavior. Because your grandfather, he wants to tell you a story. And we would say, oh my God, Mom, do we have to come inside? We're having so much fun out here. Can't we just stay out here a little longer? And she would say, no, you've got to come inside. Come inside, kids. Your grandpa wants to tell you a story. You've got to be in your best behavior. So we would come in, us 4 kids, and we were all all hyped up and sweaty and dirty, and we had been having so much fun. And we would come in, and we'd have to be on our best behavior. Sit down on the floor in front of my grandfather's favorite chair. And that chair was this big, really heavy, solid wooden chair. And I think I had been in that house 10 or 20 years, and that chair didn't move even once. It was so heavy. He would come to that chair, and that chair, you know, it was a recliner, so it had a little lever. You could pull back the lever, and the chair would recline, and you could kick back and be comfortable. But he would not do that. He wouldn't be caught dead being comfortable, because he was not telling us just any story. He was reading stories from the Bible, the Word of God. My grandpa, he was a very religious man, and he was very serious. So he wouldn't sit in that chair in any relaxed way. He would sit down, and he would lean forward in the chair, and he would hold the Bible in front of these 4 scared kids, and he would read these stories about, you know, Jonah and the whale and all these other things that happen in the Bible. And us kids, you know, we had just come in from playing outside, and we were all hyped up, and we would just do our best not to just explode in nervous laughter. And I remember years of sitting there listening to these stories and just staring at the floor in front of me, just staring at the floor and thinking, my God, don't look up. Because if I looked up, I would make eye contact with my brother and my cousins, and then we would, all 4 of us, I knew that we would just explode into laughter, and then all hell would break loose, no pun intended, and we would be in trouble forever. When I started telling this story, I thought this was going to be a story about my grandpa. But then, today, as I was practicing this story, I realized that's not a story about my grandpa at all. It's a story about me. And I think that's why we tell stories. Because we don't tell stories when we want to give a big picture, objective view of history. We tell stories when we want to tell our little slice of that history. We tell stories when we want to convey history to another person, and we want to make damn sure that we have put our personal stamp on it. And I think that that's why we tell stories. Thanks.